Joined now by Glenda Gail Parker. She missed the first half of the debate. We're happy to have her here now, so we're throwing her into the middle of this as far as the order of who will go first and who will go last. So we welcome you to the debate. Thanks for joining us. I would also like to note that we've been joined by Rich Anderson, who represents the 51st District here. Everybody can give back there he is. Thank you for attending this evening and the work in the community. And so now we are back at it. I know there was something, I know what I wanted to ask. We were talking about immigration, and I wanted to follow up with one quick question, and we'll give everybody a minute on this. And we will, Ms. Park, we're going to start with you on this one. We've been talking about immigration, but it made me want to ask the question about Donald Trump's position of banning Muslims from coming into the country, which is now, he calls extreme vetting. If I could get each of you for 1 minute to talk on Mr. Trump's proposal to ban Muslims and to implement extreme vetting for people coming into the country. And we'll just go straight down the line here. We'll start with Ms. Parker first.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you very much, Mark. And it's very nice to be here. I think the League of Women Voters for sponsoring this event. And I know that immigration, extreme vetting is of extreme interest to this community. It's not an issue that I have taken a position on. We do have to recognize that our immigration policy in the United States leaves much to be desired. The two legacy parties have turned a blind eye to the 11 million or so illegal immigrants that are here, and they've turned that blind eye for 15 years, and now there is must be something to correct that, and we don't feel that kicking everybody out is the option. We think that there should be some humane way to citizenship, and that is the position that I support.
Congressman.
Yes, I am not in favor of using a religious test as to whether or not somebody should get into this country. We are a nation that's founded on our individual religious freedoms and liberties, and I don't think that is a proper measure. You can look at a lot of other things to determine whether somebody should come into this country, but we should not use a measure of somebody's faith. We see how this nation was formed by people coming here because they were escaping that same sort of religious persecution. It is counter to what we stand for as a country. I am all for making sure we properly vet, determine who comes in, but it ought to be based on what the threat is, not based on their faith.
Councilman Rowe.
I also agree that there should be no litmus test in regards of religion for determining who comes into this country. It is absolutely un-American, and I'm glad to hear that the Congressman agrees with me on that. That's wonderful. I know that he has taken a different position than his party's nominee. I think that when you think about this, think about all the Muslims that have come into this country for many, many years and have contributed so much to our society here in America. And to come out and say that, no, we're going to go ahead and put extra barriers up for your religious group, that's unconscionable to me. The fact of the matter is, it's also a metric that is completely, you cannot figure it out, who's a Muslim and who's not a Muslim. Because you know what? Anybody can give any answer to that question. That is not something that we should be doing, and I think it's a very, very bad path to go down.
So during the break, I was approached by, I think, every undecided voter who identified themselves in the room. And just about all of them wanted to make sure I asked this question. And we're going to start with you, Mr. Rowe. Can you tell us who you are supporting for president and why?
I am wholeheartedly 100% supporting Hillary Clinton to be the next president of the United States. I'm supporting her because she is the only candidate in this race that has any idea what to do with public policy. She can tell you 1,000 different policy points, how they're all interrelated, and how it's going to make America better. She's the only person in this race that can actually figure out the challenges that we have and to come up with an equitable way of getting things done. That is something that I wholeheartedly believe, and I am proud to support her.
Actually, we're back in our pecking order now, Congressman. So, Ms. Parker, we go to you next.
Well, As it turns out, I am one of those undecided voters in the presidential election. We have been supporting, I have a television show called Green TV, and it's been on the air for Fairfax County Public Access Station, Channel 10, for about 2 years now, and we have been promoting Dr. Jill Stein. I am still undecided at this point in time as just exactly who I'm going to vote for. But I do encourage everyone to vote. And I have a strategy for those of you who are thinking that maybe this is not the time to vote. There are 4 national parties in the United States. 2 of them do not have ballot access in Virginia. If either one of them get 10% of the vote in a national election or a statewide election, they can achieve ballot access and they can put their candidates on the ballot in Virginia the way the 2 larger parties do. If you're undecided and you want a choice in the future, pick one of those 2 other national parties, the Libertarians or the Green Party. That will give you a choice in the future.
Congressman.
Yes, I am supporting our party's nominee, Donald J. Trump. I have spoken out against where I disagree with him. I've spoken out adamantly of his comments the other day, which I believe are reprehensible. There's never a situation where it's okay to objectify women. I've spoken out on that. I want to make sure that we are looking at the issues in this race. I have advised Mr. Trump and the folks there with his campaign to be discussing those issues. I think it's critical for our nation. I do believe that Mr. Trump will be there to support our men and women in uniform. I do believe he knows how to recover this economy. He's a businessman, has that business acumen. He has created jobs. He's done the things that are necessary, I think, for our nation to be able to move forward. I know what he will do as far as Supreme Court justices, which I think are also critical for the future of this nation. So I have followed what I believe is the intent. Has been clearly stated by 14 million voters that have said Donald J. Trump is the nominee of our party. As I said, there are places where I disagree with him, but you know what? My wife and I have been married for 35 years. There are a number of things that we disagree upon, but we support each other. To me, that's key in looking at this, and that is purely and simply my position and my support for Mr. Trump.
Mr. Rowe, you wanted 1 minute rebuttal?
I'll just say this. If my party nominated someone that I had major disagreements with, I would not support that nominee. I would not let the primary voters of my party speak for me, as Representative Wittman has done. He's used this as sort of an excuse of why he's supporting Donald Trump. He says, well, the people in the primary have done it, therefore I have to get on board. That is not the case. Barbara Comstock does not support Donald Trump. Scott Rigel does not support Donald Trump. John Warner does not support Donald Trump. These are good Virginia Republicans that are not on the Trump train this year. The fact is, we're looking at a major party candidate on the other side that is denigrating women. We saw the video that came out. I saw your comment that came out that said that you have all these women in your life, women that you are related to, women that have worked for you, and you said that his comments were disgusting. But at no point in that did it say, you know what, I can't support this man because of that. So I can't ask you questions directly, but my rhetorical question is, how can you say to those women in your life, I still support Donald Trump, even though he can say vile things like that?
And Congressman, I'm going to give you a chance to answer that, but we're going to let Ms. Parker get her 1 minute rebuttal here.
Yes, I would like to say that I hope that you are as well, I am outraged that the Presidential Debate Commission did not include all 4 candidates in the debates. There are 4 national parties. There are 4 candidates on the ballot that are on the ballot in enough states that they could win the election, and the American public has not been permitted to hear. You can go to my website or my YouTube channel, which is Gail Parker, and you can view a insert of Dr. Jill Stein answering the debate questions after the fact. So please be outraged and insist that all 4 candidates have an opportunity to speak in the debates.
Congressman.
Yes, I do think it's important to listen to the voters. I am not going to neglect what the voters say. Sometimes I disagree with them, but in this instance, Mr. Trump was duly nominated. There are places where I disagree with him, absolutely. And I've let those be known. I think that's part of the process. I've engaged him in his campaign about those places where we disagree. I've made that known. I haven't heard my opponent say a word about wherever he disagrees with his nominee, and I'm certain that he doesn't agree with her on a number of things. That's our obligation. We are running for these offices based on what we've done, on our position, not in a situation where we have to answer for every single thing that somebody else on the ballot does. I think that that's part of what we have to do in engaging and saying our obligation is to talk about where we stand, what our positions are on issues, and where we disagree, we ought to make that known. But again, denying or neglecting the will of the voters is a disrespect to the voters. And again, making sure people know where I disagree, I think, is critical to how our system works.
Thank you. Here's our next question. What is your position on banning gun ownership for individuals on the no-fly list? And what federal measures do you support to reduce gun violence? Ms. Parker, we're going to start with you on this one.
Well, that is, I support the Second Amendment. And so I also support law and order. And and I certainly think that it makes sense that if they're deemed dangerous enough to be on the no-fly zone, that they probably shouldn't be able to buy a gun.
Congressman, go to you next.
Yes, I don't think that folks on the no-fly list should have their Second Amendment rights taken away. Because of this, many of the folks on that no-fly list don't know that they're there, don't know how they got there, don't know how to get off the list. I can tell you there have been members of Congress that have been on the list. It's taken years for them to be able to get off the list. I don't want to have your due process rights be violated and then with that violation use that to take away your Second Amendment rights. I want to make sure we're addressing gun violence. The way we can do that, I think, is to be aggressive in punishing those individuals that commit crimes with firearms. A great example is in Richmond. Project Exile, that was put in place by the federal government years ago, said this: if you commit a violent act with a firearm, it's an automatic 5-year federal sentence. Look at what happened to the murder rate in the violent crimes that happened in Richmond with the use of guns. It dropped precipitously. There are ways that we can do that, but we have to remember, you have to address the action. You have to address what's behind those acts of violence. We have to be talking about issues of mental health. There's a lot more we can do in this country. The House actually passed a bill to reform our mental health system, to make sure that those folks with mental health issues have access to be able to have those conditions taken care of. I want to make sure we're doing that. We see acts of violence across the spectrum. It may not be guns, it may be knives, it may be a truck where 80 individuals were run over with a truck. We don't get in there and ban trucks, but we need to address the human actions behind that violence. That, to me, is the critical issue here, and we'll never get our arms around it unless we really seriously get to the public policy behind what is motivating folks to act in those ways. To me, that's central to making sure we reduce these horrible situations where we see violence being committed by individuals, no matter what the instrument.
Drew. With all due respect, I think that saying that we're not going to do no-fly, no-buy because the terror watch list isn't perfect is kind of a cop-out. See, the heart of the issue here is maybe we need to look at the terror watch list and the no-fly list, and if there are these mistakes on it, if there's people that are on this list, we ought to do something about the list itself and actually make it better. Let's put in the time and the effort to do right by this. So yes, I absolutely support no-fly, no-buy. You're on the terror watch list or the no-fly list, no gun for you. And guess what? If you want to get your gun rights restored, just we'll put in place a process to make sure that your Second Amendment rights aren't being infringed incorrectly if you shouldn't be on the no-fly list. In addition, I'm also for universal background checks. This is to make sure that we're closing the gun show loophole and that people that are doing private sales are getting background checks. These two measures are something that these are supported by over 80% of the American public. And the reason why we're not able to do common sense gun reform is because of the NRA. Because the NRA gives a lot of money to certain congressmen, and that they buy their vote off. And they do this by giving them the money and making sure that they fight for that A rating from the NRA. Because if you even breathe one word about possibly introducing any sort of gun safety legislation, you're going to lose a lot of ranking there with the NRA. That is the problem with this. And really, this speaks to almost a bigger issue about campaign finance reform and the influence of lobbyists in Washington. But yeah, so when it comes down to no fly, no buy, and common sense gun legislation that involves universal background checks.
Congressman, you wanted another minute on this?
I did. Somehow saying that we have a list that includes people that are wrongly chosen to be on that list and don't have their due process, to say that we skip over that constitutional right and then we use that to take another constitutional right, is that complete contradiction of what our founding fathers had in mind. They wanted to make sure that we had due process. They wanted to make sure that our constitutional rights are protected. I would much rather make sure that we do that and make sure that we are standing by what I believe our founding fathers had in mind and what we today are sworn to do. When I raise my right hand, I swear to uphold and defend the Constitution. There are ways that we can get to addressing the underlying causes behind gun violence, but somehow believing that going to a simple list where people don't know how they got there, don't know how to get off, is not the way for us to have a serious conversation and have serious outcomes about reducing violence by any measure from one person against another.
Mr. Rowe, you wanted another minute.
Yeah, so when it comes right down to it, the founding fathers could not have imagined a world where we have radical terrorists coming into our country that want to mow down American citizens with high-capacity magazines. Here's the thing. I look at this from a practical standpoint. I would rather make a mistake and accidentally prevent somebody from buying a gun that should have been able to buy a gun to make sure that terrorists cannot buy guns. This is something that I strongly feel.
Parker, did you want back in on this?
Yes, I would. I would like to say that I am concerned about the number of people that are being killed not by guns, but by automobiles. 33,000 Americans are killed on our roadways every year. 430,000 are injured or maimed on our roadways every year. My main issue is mass transit and rail. Rail is safer. It cuts dependence on fossil fuels. It helps us have cleaner air, cleaner water. It will help us have a healthier population. We need to be more concerned with the transportation issue, in my view.
We'll turn our attention now to international affairs. For the three of you, what would you have the United States do to relieve the crisis in Aleppo and the rest of Syria, and for the victims fleeing for refuge? We start with you, Congressman.
Well, I've had the opportunity to visit the Syrian refugee camps in Turkey to see what those Syrians are going through. And what they asked at that refugee camp to me was, what's the United States going to do to help us? They don't want an intervention by the United States. They actually want folks to give them the ability for themselves to go after the Assad government, to go after ISIS in that particular region. Today, as we speak, we have such a morass of different entities over there trying to exert influence. Because of lack of U.S. action, we now have Russia that's taken control there. When we draw the red line there and then say, oh, by the way, that really wasn't a red line, we move back, we send a terrible message to that area of the world, and we have actually empowered Bashar Assad and ISIS in the area through that lack of action. So the foreign policy we have, I believe, has actually led to the state of affairs that we have there now. The question is how do we fix it? There's not an easy answer, and it's not about just saying we're going to go in and do airstrikes. You know, anybody that knows military doctrine knows that you can go in and strike an area with air power, but you don't maintain or gain that ground. There do have to be people on the ground. Now, I don't believe that the U.S. by itself should have forces on the ground, because I think that's another quagmire that we would be in. We, I think, have lost the opportunity in negotiating a ceasefire. As you see, we had to back out because the Russians were not willing to do the things necessary to have a meaningful ceasefire. So that leaves us in an untenable situation. Not a whole lot of options there other than for us to act unilaterally, which I don't think is the case, nor do I think we should have a sole U.S. presence there. Now, we can certainly assist and advise, but it's going to have to be forces within that area or some kind of peace accords that has to be done jointly with the Arab nations in the area. They have to step up. I think Turkey has to be more involved. I think the other Arab nations in the Middle East region have to be part of a long-term provision for ceasefire there. And the question then becomes, how do you have governance after that?
Thank you. Ms. Parker, we go to you next.
Well, in all of this discussion about Aleppo, I have not heard anything about a UN peacekeeping mission. That's what we used to do. when we, in the Middle East, is send in a UN peacekeeping force. You know, I believe that we need to stop all of these wars and bring our troops home. We can save $1 trillion a day by not having wars abroad. And the thing about it is, we have an alternative. And the alternative is renewable energy. We can be 100% on renewable energy within 10 years with the right emphasis. And the emphasis we're not getting today from the two legacy parties. We need to stand up and demand that they take action to ensure that we have a future for ourselves and our children and our grandchildren. We can make those wars for oil obsolete. We have a better way now. The solar age is here and we need to get on board.
That's Monroe.
You know, American foreign policy used to be a lot easier, where it was the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And Syria is completely off the rails when it comes to this. You have a 5-sided war now in Syria. You have the Assad regime, you have Syrian moderates, you have ISIS, you have the Kurds, and you have the remnants of the Al-Nusra Front. They're still fighting too. They were used to be Al-Qaeda affiliated. Because of this, it's a complete mess. What we need to do right now to solve the problem in Syria, I think, is we need to work on working with the Kurds and also getting the Kurds to work with the Turks. Now, just a little bit of background on this. In Iraq, you have the Peshmerga. That is the Kurdish forces that are in Iraq, and the Turks actually get along with them very well. But over in Syria, you have the Kurds, and they're part of, many of the Kurds are part of the YPG. That's actually been designated a terrorist group by many international observers and the United States and Turkey. What we need to do right now is to make sure that we can pull the YPG back from being the organization that it has been in the past, and we have to use the Syrian Kurds as partners in the region. They have actually been doing major advances into ISIS-held territory, and we have to work with them. The biggest challenge to that is getting Turkey and the Kurds to work together. I think that's going to be our best strategy moving forward in Syria, and that's something that I feel. Now, Aleppo specifically, because we were talking about Aleppo. Aleppo's a mess right now because the city has been depopulated. The Assad regime now has free reign to bomb the city. There's still one pocket of Syrian moderates still trying to hold out, but it is a really, really tough situation. Because of this, you have Russia, they're going in and bombing just like the Assad regime is doing. What we need to do is continue to apply international pressure to Russia, and if that involves sanctions, that's something that I would support.
Congressman, you wanted one more minute on this?
Absolutely. I want to talk about believing that the Kurds and the Turks can somehow work together. It sounds great in concept. I've been to Kurdistan, have visited with the Kurds, I've been to Turkey, visited with the Turks, talked to leadership on both sides. Folks, there are centuries of divide between the Kurds and the Turks. It would be great if they could work together and find a common foe, but their common foe right now is each other. So to believe somehow that that's going to be the wherewithal to jump in, I don't think reflects reality. And again, it goes directly to my conversations that I've had with folks there. If you look at the disparate forces that you see there in Syria right now, there is not enough of a force there to have anybody that will overcome ISIS. There's certainly not the will to have Bashar Assad step aside or in any kind of peace accord with the major players there, with Russia and the United States, to actually have an opening so that you can have peace. And you have to have security before you can have any realm of governance. And I think the chance of governance there anytime soon, unfortunately, is not in the cards.
Sure, you wanted another minute.
Turkey does have good relations with the Kurds, the Iraqi Kurds. In fact, they even made oil deals with autonomous Kurdistan up in northern Iraq there. So they are able to make deals together, and they are able to have economic relations. So this is something that is possible. The problem is that that Turkey sees the Syrian Kurds a little bit differently because of their relations with YPG. That is the terrorist group. We need to go ahead and separate YPG from the rest of the Syrian Kurds, and if we can do that, we can start to move towards trying to work together on this. Turkey's relations with the Kurds has been, again, like the Congressman said, this has been very, very difficult over the past hundreds of years. You can go back to the Ottoman Empire if you want to get historical about this. But yeah, this is something that's been going on a long time, but frankly, it's something that we should at least try to work towards, and maybe we can get a big solution out of it.
Here's our next question. What should the role of the federal government be in reducing conflict between law enforcement officials and the African American community? And we start with you, Mr. Whitman.
Community policing. That is something that I absolutely believe in, and that we need to go ahead and try to create federal guidelines by bringing police officer, law enforcement, and communities together to come up with these guidelines so that we can start talking about de-escalation and start talking about community policing. Now, just as an example, let's go back to Dallas. A couple months ago, they just went through that awful massacre of police officers. But one thing that was very positive about that before that happened was that Black Lives Matter and the police officers were getting along very well during that protest up until things went wrong. And the reason because of that the police chief that was there in Dallas, he had actually instituted a very robust community policing program when he took his position in 2010. And he did that all the way through up till he just recently resigned. The way that you can tell that worked was that complaints against police officers in Dallas from 2010 to now were reduced by 64%. That's the power of community policing, because if you can actually get out there and know the people that you are interacting with every day, and it's not so disconnected like you're given a gun and a badge and you're just told to go police the community, if you're able to do that and you're able to de-escalate those situations because you have those interpersonal relationships with people in the community, that is critically important. So community policing to me is the key.
Ms. Parker, we go to you next.
Thank you. I'm going to give a short answer on this question and then use some of my time to tell you a little bit about me that I didn't do in the opening statement. But the fact is that all lives matter. And when there is a misunderstanding in the community should make their feelings known, and it should be dealt with. The Department of Justice does have some very good programs, training programs for the law enforcement officers, and we should make sure that those programs are robust and that the police forces across the nation have adequate training and access to them. So that's my answer on that. All lives matter, and we should work to make things better. A little bit about myself. I have over 20 years experience as a governmental budget analyst. That's my career field. My undergraduate degree is in business management, and my graduate degree is in business administration. I'm a retired Air Force officer with over 20 years of service. I have 3 grown children and 4 grandchildren. When my daughter and her family lives in San Diego, my son lives in Georgia, and my daughter and my other grandson lives in Oklahoma City. And I'm running for public office because I have a long-held belief in our democratic process, and I feel that I can contribute positive solutions.
Sure. Folks, community policing is definitely, I think, the largest aspect of what we can do to successfully address these particular issues. But it should not be a federally mandated one-size-fits-all. I have traveled around and spoken to and met with every police chief and sheriff in the 1st Congressional District to ask their perspective on what we need to do on police issues, whether it's the issues of police interactions with citizens, whether it's the opioid abuse epidemic, whether it's mental health issues, and by every turn they said, Rob, what we want to make sure you do is to give us the flexibility for us to solve our problems locally. If you're going to provide funds, make sure you give them to us for us to use in the ways that we see best fit. In other words, doing that through block grants. They understand better than anybody in Washington what their local issues are, how to interact with communities. They know the people in their communities. They know what they can do to be successful. Many of these sheriffs have grown up with those individuals. They've worked on these programs through the years. We're blessed in the 1st Congressional District in that we have very strong community policing programs. These sheriffs and chiefs of police, though, said, Rob, please don't come in and tell us how to do this or make us change what we know now is working. To me, that's not the way to make things better. I believe our communities understand it. I believe where we've been successful, that we can have those laboratories of democracy in each of the localities and say, hey, listen, if something's working in Prince William County, then maybe Sheriff Decatur in Stafford County needs to look at it. To have that exchange of information makes our communities better, and it assures, too, that we empower folks at the local level. Folks that are closest to the problem know most about what needs to be done. Our communities, our sheriffs know better than anybody else in Washington what we have to do to fix this problem. I believe community policing is part of that solution, but not in a government-mandated, federal government-mandated one-size-fits-all.
Mr. Rowe, you wanted another minute?
I don't even need that much, just 15 seconds. I actually agree with the congressman on that. So when I'm talking about federal funding for community policing, it's communities come up with their own plan. Funding can be provided if you come up with that plan yourself. I think it should be done at the local level. Every community is different, and they need to create that themselves.
All right, so this next question is my least favorite because it's the longest and the smallest type, so I need my glasses to read. So pay attention, candidates. The Yale Program on Climate Change Communication has been conducting polls on the subject of climate change for several years. Their most recent poll in April of this year found an increasing number of voters, 73%, up 7% since 2014, think climate change is happening and it will be important to their vote this year. Multiple reports from the Pentagon, including from President George W. Bush's Department of Defense, conclude that climate change is a threat multiplier that puts our men and women in uniform at risk. Now to the question. What legislation would you support to move the United States to a clean energy economy while protecting those in lower income brackets who spend higher percentage of their income on energy costs? And would you support a carbon tax? And Ms. Parker, we begin with you, 2 minutes.
Wow, that's a question that's near and dear to my heart. The legislation that I would support is developing an energy policy, a renewable energy policy. The solar age is here, and we need to encourage renewable energy, solar, wind, and water energy. So the first thing that we need to do is to develop an energy policy that's based upon renewable energy. And that is the main thing. Then the second thing we need to do is we need to provide a way for us to go places in the future. And that is rail, mass transit. We need to build massive amounts of light rail feeder systems in our population centers that will conserve the fuels, the fossil fuels that we have, so that those folks in the rural areas that must drive because they don't have any other way to get around except to drive will be able to have access to those fossil fuels in a longer time. You know, people in Richmond had the trolley cars, and they loved it. And there is a very, very strong contingent of people in Richmond that want to bring the trolley cars back. Rail trolley cars, not the ones that run on roads, that run on, that burn fossil fuels and pollute our air. We need to build massive amounts of rail, and we need to do it quickly.
Congressman, we go to you next.
Yes. Absolutely. Well, folks, I spent 27 years as an environmental health specialist working with the state of Virginia. I look at these issues and I believe this. We need an all-of-the-above energy policy, including renewable sources of energy. One of the greatest things we can do that we can all agree upon is what are we going to do to increase energy efficiency? What are we going to do to use less energy? That's a place we can all agree upon. I think it's great for our country. It helps in air quality. It helps overall, and it reduces the cost to all of our citizens. Those are things, too, that encourage greater technology to be applied. I am not in favor of a carbon tax. I think any additional taxing system there doesn't allow efficiencies within our economic system to take rule, and it doesn't allow, too, for us to use technology and allow the marketplace to determine what's the most efficient way for us to utilize energy. To me, that's what's made this nation great. If you look at the greatest advances in energy efficiency, it's been through the free market where people see an opportunity there. They develop those technologies, they apply those, and the marketplace speaks as to how those work. I mean, it's pretty simple. People don't want to pay more for energy. They would like to be able to pay less. They'd like to be able to use less. That's a place that we can all agree upon. It ought to be something that we're working together on to get to that place. That has positive effects up and down the board.
Councilman Rowe.
We have to face facts. Climate change is real. It is happening, it is man-made, and it's caused by carbon emissions. That's the deal. We have to recognize that first before we can actually start to solve the problem. So for me, cap and trade, I think, is one of the ways that we can go. This is something that other states have actually instituted, and it's working well for those states. Let's also look at what energy that we're using right now. We need to go ahead and put more investment into wind power, solar power, a lot of the stuff that Gail was actually talking about. In terms of fossil fuels, though, yeah, let's look at coal for a second. There is no such thing as clean coal. That's an oxymoron. You can tell the folks down at Possum Point about clean coal, and they can tell you about that too. But here's the thing. We do need, when I say an all-the-above energy policy, we need all the above of all the things that are actually going to work for the 21st century. We're not going to end this century still using fossil fuels. It's not going to happen. We're going to continue to move forward on this. And the critical thing to also remember is, when we're talking about climate change and being ready for climate change, while the government languishes on this, private industry actually is building this into their future plans. You have Fortune 500 companies right now that are actually drafting different plans to deal with the effects of climate change and how it's going to affect their bottom line. If for them, they can actually see this and see it coming, and they want to, listen, these companies, they want to make money, they want to maximize profits. If they're willing to put investment into portions of their company that can actually deal with the effects of climate change, and that is sometimes a cost to them, if they're willing to do that, they're realizing that climate change is going to happen, and it is the future that we're going to have to deal with.
Congressman, you wanted a minute?
I do. I just want to talk about cap and trade. Cap and trade is not a viable policy. Look at what happened in Europe. It doesn't work, period. I think Mr. Rowe brings up a great point. Yes, companies are investing in clean energy sources. They are investing in greater efficiencies. That's the free market at work. That's those companies making those decisions. It's not the federal government coming up with a system to say, you're going to do X or you're going to do Y. I want to make sure that we encourage those companies to do that, but it's the free marketplace that determines the best placement of those resources. I mean, we look at crony capitalism, things like Solyndra, where when the government gets involved and tries to sway the marketplace, we see what happens. Not good outcomes. Let the free market determine that. When people can save money on energy, I want to make sure that we allow them to do that. As Mr. Rowe pointed out, companies look at the bottom line, they look at where they're going to invest. That is the best course of action for us to take, and including, I think, the all-of-the-above energy policy this nation needs.
Ms. Parker, one more minute.
Yes, I'd like to see the hands of those of you who would like to see a 20% return on your investment. And Mr. Kerry Campbell has a 3-bedroom home. He put solar panels on his 3-bedroom home. He's getting a 20% return on his investment. He has a plus house. Last year, he got a $5,000 check from the utility company. You know, we should be doing that, all of us, and we should be insisting that our public buildings have solar panels on all of them.
Mr. Rowe, you wanted another minute.
I'll just say that businesses are going to do what's best for their bottom line. If they have a choice between still emitting carbon at a high rate versus not doing so, and it's cheaper to continue to pollute, they're going to pollute because that is going to maximize their profits. That's a simple fact. And the thing about the European Union, now see, here's the thing. This is working in many of the states that are actually instituting cap and trade. But in the European Union, if it's not working in the European Union, that's no reason to believe that it's not going to work in America. See, this is the thing. If something is not working abroad, I don't buy into the fact that we can't actually do it better in America. I think it's very American of us to actually say that, you know what, just because another country couldn't do it, we can do it better. That's something that I feel about cap and trade.
This is a question that I honestly typically ask at most candidate debates. I'm going to ask it here for pointed reason, Congressman, but I'll give it to all three of you. We'll just do 1 minute on this, and we'll start with you, Congressman. If elected, will each of you commit to serving the full 2-year term? Congressman.
For me, I'm running with everything I've got to return to Congress. I'm going to be exploring other opportunities in 2017. I am going to make sure that I commit and do everything I can during that period of time to serve the 1st District congressional constituents with everything in my power. I plan to do that. I will take nothing away from serving those constituents during this next 2-year period.
Mr. Rowe?
Yes, I can commit to serving a full 2-year term. But let me talk a little bit about what Congressman Wittman's been up to. He is actually campaigning both for Congress and for governor at the same time. You can actually go to his Facebook page and see how he's been going around other parts of the state, that aren't part of the 1st District, and he's campaigning. Like, he went down to the Fiddlers Festival down in Floyd County. He's been up to Loudoun County. He's been to other parts of the state that are not part of the 1st District. Now, my job is a geographic information systems analyst, so I make maps for a living. If I need to provide you with a map of the 1st District, I'm happy to do so that you know the boundaries. They have changed recently. I do understand that. But the thing about his run for governor is that if he wins, he's going to be elected back to Congress, and he's going to be running a lot of the time during 2017. That takes away from our representation in Congress, and I don't think that that's fair to the people of the 1st District. And if he does actually win the governorship, then he is going to leave a vacancy, and then we have to fill a special election. So my question is, where do you want to be when the next governor of Virginia is sworn in? Do you want to be on the Capitol steps in Richmond getting sworn in there, or do you want to be up in Congress doing your job?
And we'll get to you, Congressman. Ms. Parker, it's your turn.
Yes, I'll be happy to commit to 2 years service, and I'll quit my day job. And I'll even go one step further. I won't spend 50% of my time trying to raise money from you folks. I'll just do my job on the Hill.
Congressman, you wanted another minute.
Absolutely. Well, Mr. Rowe, I'm sure you know as a geographic information specialist too that issues don't know boundaries. And traveling across the state to understand what affects other districts makes me better in understanding the things that we can do in the 1st Congressional District and in Washington. The committees I serve on, the House Armed Services Committee, Natural Resources Committee, those issues don't know boundaries either. I argue it makes me a better congressman to know those issues, what I can do to work with other members of Congress throughout the state to understand their district. By the way, are you against Mr. King running for vice president? He still continues to serve in the Senate. So if you are against me running, then I suppose that you'll speak out against Mr. King's candidacy there as vice president.
Mr. Rowe.
Mr. King's candidacy for vice president was an unforeseen circumstance. He did not decide to run for Senate and then also think about running for vice president at the same time. You have chosen to run for both offices at the same time. That was something that's a little bit different.
I could do this all night.
Yes. Well, then I would suggest if Senator Kane didn't choose to do that, then why didn't he turn down the nomination for vice president to say that he was going to serve there in the Senate seat?
Who's running for Congress in the 1st District, Senator Kane or you?
The issue is about comparing apples to apples. Looking at what Senator Kane is doing is no different than what I'm looking at doing. Senator Kane right now, you can't tell me that what he's doing on the road right now in any way, shape, or form spends the time in Virginia that you believe he needs to spend here.
So what are your plans for the inauguration in 2018?
The inauguration in 2018, I would
For
say
governor.
I would say that that's a theoretical. And
Would you like to be in DC or Richmond?
my effort right now is with everything I have to run in 2016, to run successfully there, to serve in 2016. I believe, and if you look at where I travel in the 1st Congressional District, I am across the 1st Congressional District the vast majority of my time. I do spend some time in other areas of the state, but I argue that those have utility, or that time has utility to members of the 1st Congressional District.
Aren't you glad you stayed to the end? And this does bring us to, and this timed out perfectly, candidates, because we have enough time for your closing statements. Each candidate gets 2 minutes, and we begin with you, Mr. Rowe.
First of all, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. I mean, listen, I know how hard it is to find time on a weeknight to do this, and thank you so much for coming out. Again, I want to thank you, Mark, for moderating us and keeping us straight here, and also to Jim, timing us as good as possible. So, for me, when it comes down to it, I just want to do what's best for the 1st District. That's always been at my heart and what drives me to work hard for you every single day. We have a lot of challenges that we're facing right now, and we need to make sure that we're getting the investments here in the district to move this district forward. And we need to have people that are working every single day, are making the decisions, and are using sound judgment to go ahead and do that. I don't feel like we're getting that right now. And with all due respect to Congressman Wittman, I think that his support of Donald Trump actually is an issue. And I will bring this up a little bit. You're a congressman, you have experience in Congress, you have been there for a long time, and you are a leader of the Republican Party. And with that, when you support Donald Trump, you are lending legitimacy to his candidacy. And for me, and I truly feel this, and a lot of other people feel this too, that he is the most unqualified major party candidate that I've ever seen. And a lot of other people in this room have ever seen too. So because you've done that, that brings into question a lot of your decisions. When I go around the district, I hear about Rob Wittman, nice guy Rob Wittman. He's always been a very friendly guy. But when people hear that you support Donald Trump after everything that he said, they're taken aback. They can't believe that you could do that. So that's the change that we need in the 1st District this year. I'm a change candidate. I do want to change things up. I'm not going to fall into the same political traps that a lot of other people do. I'm just going to go in there roaring and trying to do the best thing for the 1st District. So if I can get your support this year, I would very much appreciate it. My name is Matt Rowe. Check the box.
Ms. Parker, you're next.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here and for being interested in this office. I thank the other 2 candidates on the ballot for participating in this debate. I believe that we should have one of these debates in each and every county in the district. And I would like to say that I bring to you a way forward that leads to a bright, hopeful future. A future offering us options for safer mobility, cleaner air, water that our children and our grandchildren can drink safely, energy from the sun and the wind, and jobs, lots of jobs, and better health. I bring to you a way forward that offers peace and honor and financial stability and a relentless pursuit of these American values. Investments in rail and green energy make us healthier and make us money. Rail built anywhere in America benefits all of America. For every dollar invested in rail, $25 are returned to the community. Rail and renewable energy is the way to prosperity for the future. The solar age is here, and it is imperative that we get on board. It's past time that we bring the green revolution to Virginia and to America. I'm asking you to be courageous. We can prepare America for the future. I'm Gail Parker, Virginia's independent candidate for Congress, and I ask you to trust me with your vote in November.
Thank you. Congressman, you'll get the last word tonight.
Good. Well, thank you. Mark, thanks again. Thanks for your efforts here. I want to thank the League of Women Voters here. I want to thank the Committee of 100 and both the candidates here tonight for being part of this. This truly is what makes this nation special. I'm humbled to serve the folks of the 1st District. And folks, really, this is about issues. It's about our economy. It's about our military. It's about our national security. It's about what are we going to do to make sure we get things done in Washington. And one of the things I fought for there, what I will continue to fight for, is to make sure that members of Congress do the job. I have a bill, the only bill there, to try to reform things. It's called No Budget, No Pay. I don't think a single member of Congress should get a paycheck unless they get a budget done. And let me tell you, folks, I'm the only member of Congress to put that bill in. When I did, I had to go to Walmart and get a pair of asbestos underwear because my colleagues did not like that they would be asked to give up their paycheck because of that. Secondly, is I think, too, Congress should not be able to leave town for vacation in August unless all 12 appropriations bills are done. No vacation, no pay. If members are serious about that, they ought to be able to commit to that, put their name on the line to make sure they're going to reform Washington to get the job done, to make sure it's about process. To me, that's key. That's what fighting to make sure things work and to make sure we're representing your best interest there. I've been honored and privileged to be there. I look forward to continuing to serve you. I ask for your vote on November the 8th. Again, thank you so much. Thanks for coming out. May God bless each of you. May God bless our great Commonwealth of Virginia. May God bless our United States of America.
Ladies and gentlemen, the candidates for the 1st District. Thank you all for coming. Thanks to the host. Thanks to the people who organized this. Be sure to get out and vote.